Mommy has a serious illness and has just been hospitalized. Despite believing that she will die soon, her biggest fear is that her existence will come to an end. Just the thought that her life will end makes her desperate. During the night, the girl notices the presence of someone outside her room. The door slowly opens and what she sees next makes her terrified. The next morning, the doctor goes to her room and the girl claims that she doesn't want to die. The doctor says he is doing his best to treat her illness and needs the young woman to have hope. Mommy says that the night before, she dreamed about the Grim Reaper and that was a sign that there was no more hope for her. However, Kuroda says that what she had seen was not the Grim Reaper, but a patient from the hospital. The girl counters saying that it is not possible for that to be a human being. Later, while talking to his assistant, the doctor says that if that patient keeps wandering around the hospital, he will cause problems. However, it is understandable that in his condition, he is afraid to sleep. Both walk to his room and the assistant asks what the condition of that patient is. The doctor reveals that his name is Tetsuro Mukoda and he arrived at the hospital 2 months ago, claiming that he suffered from having very long dreams. He said he had been in this condition for a month, and the first time it happened, a single night's dream seemed to last 2 or 3 days. At first he thought it was all in his head, but as time went on the dreams became longer and longer. Mukoda began to confuse his dreams with reality and this was disturbing his personal life. So Kuroda decided to hospitalize him to monitor his sleep cycles and found that he was having serious seizures while sleeping. His brain activity indicated that, at that moment, he was in the deep sleep phase. When he was awakened, Mukoda did not remember where he was because, in his dream, a year and a half had passed. A few weeks passed and the situation only got worse. That night, his dream had lasted 10 years. The doctor claims that his team was committed to discovering the cause of those dreams and the patient urges them to hurry up, otherwise his dreams could last more than 100 years. If it gets to that point, there is no other way than total madness. The duration of dreams seemed to increase exponentially. This even began to reflect on Mukoda's physical appearance. The doctor finally arrives at his room and the boy, who was already looking like an alien, asks where he is. This was a common morning procedure. Kuroda introduces himself and explains that the young man sought him out 2 months ago. By doing so, Mukoda remembers what happened. He asks where Mommy is and runs through the hospital looking for his wife. When he finally finds her, the girl is shocked and the doctors try to hold him down. At that moment, Mukoda realizes that everything was just a dream and Mommy hadn't married him. Meanwhile, Mommy continued screaming desperately and stated that she didn't want to die. Kuroda comments that he had never seen a patient so afraid of death. As the days passed, Mukoda's situation only got worse and, more and more, his appearance resembled a degenerating alien. Kuroda continued to accompany his patient, until one day his body completely fell apart. While researching the boy's remains, the doctor found some unknown crystals in his brain. He suspects this material is related to that man's endless dreams. Even after all that had happened, Mommy was still hospitalized. Kuroda goes to her room to pay a visit and asks how the girl is feeling. She claims that she feels better and reveals that lately, her dreams seem to be getting longer. Days later, his intern noticed that Mammy's illness was healing. However, her appearance was also being changed, as happened with the previous patient. Then, Kuroda reveals that he was using the crystals found in Mukoda's brain to aid in the girl's treatment. His explanation for this is that since the girl is very afraid of dying, it would be a relief for her if she entered an eternal dream. Furthermore, he decided to use Mommy as the first guinea pig for his studies. His plan is to find a way to allow humanity to have infinite dreams. That way, no one would fear the end of their own existence anymore. Screenwriter Iwasaki has been feeling like something bad is about to happen. Trying to relax in a coffee shop, he browses a magazine and comes across an image of a model that makes him horrified. The woman's deeply morbid expression penetrates Iwasaki's mind. He begins to have nightmares about her. The vision of that woman didn't allow him to work on his scripts anymore. It was disturbing. He comments with his friend Oda about this frightening image. And the friend doesn't believe anyone can have such monstrous traits. The picture must have just come out defective. He asks Iwasaki to let it go, as without the script, they can't finish the project. After a few days, Iwasaki had already forgotten that haunting image and returned to his work routine. He and his friends are creating an independent film, and since they couldn't find girls suitable for the role in high school, they decided to audition through letters. As they are not that popular, only 3 were sent to them. When checking the letters, everything was fine, until reaching the 3rd envelope. It's not possible, it was that bizarre model. Iwasaki is shocked and tells Oda that it was exactly that monster that was disturbing him. But Oda's idea couldn't be worse. He decided that he would give the job to the demonic model because of her unique appearance. Iwasaki is furious. He counters that this was not a horror movie. Either way, they're going to stick with the plan. They first interviewed a perfect girl for the role called Tamei Mori. They adore the girl. But look who has arrived. Fuchi-san, the model from your worst nightmares. Oda invites her to sit down and makes a bold joke, saying that Iwasaki is a big fan of hers. Look at these creepy eyes, staring at Iwasaki and even giving him a little smile. What a monstrous face. Out of the interview, Iwasaki questions his friend not to make this kind of joke, but Oda is just joking, saying it would be nice to take Fuchi on set. Maybe she devours the main model. Iwasaki still feels that something is wrong. Everybody drives out for shooting. Iwasaki is feeling short of breath, for obvious reasons, and asks if they will arrive soon. One of the friends comments that the shooting will be in the mountains, far from the city. Then Fuchi lets out a devilish laugh and reveals huge fangs in her mouth. Upon arriving at the place, the friends are impressed by Fuchi's fangs. The woman comments in a terrifying tone that she loves places like that. While Oda is helping Tamei with the scene, Fuchi is staring at Iwasaki. He says he's feeling nauseous and goes away to wash his face in the river. But Fuchi suddenly appears following him. Iwasaki starts to run away, hearing the woman's terrifying laughter. Looks like he lost her. He runs back to the staff and says he wants to leave, he won't be near that monster anymore and gives the idea of leaving her behind. But before they could decide anything, Fuchi appears and interrupts the conversation. The shooting continues and only Tamei appears in the scenes. Fuchi doesn't like this at all, and starts to question them. Again they try to stall her, saying that it was better to take a break. The friends think of a good strategy to get rid of that freak, but leaving her behind would be dangerous for her to come back for revenge. It's in this indecision that Miyaki comes running in despair and tells the group that Tamei was eaten by Fuchi. Iwasaki thinks it's totally possible, so they go to check it out. They find blood all over the place. Fuchi comes up behind them, full of blood and licking her lips. She just says that now she's going to be the star of that movie. And she starts running after the whole group. Miyaki was captured and brutally eaten. Iwasaki slips and his friends leave him behind. Now he knew that the bad omen was real. Fuchi tells him they were alone at last and the tale ends. Are Iwasaki and the others still alive? Certainly not, as Fuchi wouldn't let them get away. This monster is still alive and even more powerful. Suichi is an awkward boy who uses nails instead of teeth in his mouth and loves to end the lives of everyone around him. He has a very sadistic and evil mood, and has dark magical abilities. He had a classmate named Otsuka hospitalized in severe pain, as the girl he liked, named Midori, really only had eyes for the popular student. This student spread several rumors, saying that he had famous family members and that he saved a child from being hit by a car, becoming a hero among the students. The worst rumor was that Midori and he were having a romantic relationship. The girl completely freaked out and revealed that she had seen Suichi whispering around some girls in order to spread false rumors so that everyone would fall for his lies. Suichi was unmasked and teased by the whole class after that. And certainly, he would get his revenge. After a few days, something creepy appeared taped to the classroom blackboard. The Fuchi model image, from a magazine. The whole room was shocked at the image of that monster. Everyone started talking about a new rumor that 4 students had left school and found a very tall woman in a dark alley. She was standing there saying absolutely nothing, until she asked them if they thought she was pretty. When the boys' eyes got used to the darkness, they could see her terrifying face. They ran away terrified, but she chased them at high speed screaming that she would devour them. Some students may think this is a hoax, but we know that Fuchi is capable of hunting down people who disagree with her appearance. But the rumors don't end there. Midori was very jealous of the student Madoka, because the girl also liked Otsuka. The new information was that Madoka bathed in a mysterious swamp that could make the person more beautiful. Convinced by her friend that she should do something to win Otsuka's heart, Midori decides to go to the damsel's abyss swamp, aspiring the ultimate beauty. It was clear where these strange rumors would lead. She enters that disgusting place in her bathing suit. Then she hears someone laugh. It was Suichi. He reveals that all of the rumors were false and made by him, including about the monstrous model. He wanted to get revenge on Midori, and for that, he started taking several pictures of her to show everyone that the girl really went to bathe in the swamp. But not everything said by Suichi was a lie. Out of nowhere, several birds startle behind the trees and a huge head comes out of the lake and raises a gigantic and even more demonic version of Fuchi. She screams at Suichi saying that he doesn't have permission to take her picture in the swamp, and she's going to show him what happens to anyone who breaks that rule, adding that he looked really juicy. Midori manages to escape, but Suichi just keeps saying that she was too beautiful, and once again the end of the victims becomes a mystery. Oji calls his friend Sugio to show him a pot of nectar which he risked his life to get in a faraway forest in Japan. He found this mysterious drink in a tribe. They seemed to extract it from a plant, which they had great adoration for. Oji says he could call it the nectar of the gods, because it's so yummy. Sugio ended up tasting it and the taste was beyond human comprehension. Really incredible. There's just one detail. Oji says the tribe warned him not to get caught by the nectar god while drinking that stuff, or the consequences could be serious. But he didn't understand what it means to get caught. Well, Sugio tells some friends to go to Oji's house to see the nectar. Since he wasn't at home, Kamita decides to go in through the window. Everyone ends up following their friend, but Sugio asks them to just drink a little so they wouldn't irritate his friend. Everyone tastes it, and they are delighted with that delicious thing. But something was wrong. The house had a rotten smell. They go to the next room and find a lot of blood spattered in the wall, like something has exploded. It really was bizarre. Kamita comments that they should get out of there immediately. Sugio notes that the map indicating the Nectar Village was under the table. And here comes trouble. The friends got addicted. They filled several bottles and were drinking every last drop. Then, Yasmin explodes out of nowhere. Everyone is in shock. What would have happened there? While they were arguing together at home about what was going on, Ruruko puts just a little bit of nectar in her mouth and brutally explodes. Sugio suggests that the nectar is causing this. But it doesn't make sense, because everyone had already taken it. He remembers that his friend warned about the tribe's rule. Don't get caught by God drinking the liquid. And the days go by and the situation only gets worse. None of them can eat normal foods, everything tastes awful. With their taste buds destroyed, they can only think of the nectar of the gods. Kamita arrives there and says he's been trying to figure out the secret to not getting caught while drinking. He tested it on several friends offering it to them, but they all died. Yu couldn't stand the hunger anymore and had to take the drink. She put some in her mouth and nothing happened. Sasuji chugs the bottle in despair and his body is smashed. Yu finally managed to see the creature responsible for smashing her friend. Desperate, she tries to flee into the river and takes more of the sacred nectar and ends up getting caught by the monster. Kamita collapses just watching the whole thing and notices that Sugio had dropped a map after getting smashed. He decided to follow the coordinates and found a tree with bizarre tentacles. His addiction was such that he stuck his knife into the tree to take some of the nectar and ended up being attacked by the tentacles, exploding like his friends. It really is a mystery. The tree can teleport anywhere, and if the tentacle catches you drinking the nectar, it will be your end. Would you have the courage to taste this drink? Yuko was a very communicative girl, always talking non-stop, but one day, she just stopped talking. The little that came out of her mouth was distorted in the wrong words. When she stopped going to school, her friend Rai decided to see what was going on. Upon arriving at her home, she heard a noise coming from the back. The girl's parents were killing several slugs in the backyard, as they are like a plague. When Rai enters to see her friend Yuko, she finds the girl in shock. She is aggressive and in despair. When opening her mouth, a giant slug comes out of it. The scene is totally disturbing. Yuko's parents decide to fill a bathtub with salt, and ask her to dive in and open her mouth inside. The idea was that the salt would destroy the slug, but Yuko was taking too long there, and when trying to get her out, only her head came out of there. Her body became so small it was impossible to see it. The end of this is worse you could imagine. Yuko's head served as a shell for the snail. And now, she lives among other slugs in her family's garden. If you get close, the head looks at you with a look of sadness. That was Yuko's fate, a mixture of agony and dread. So let's go to the third story, called The Neighbor Window. Hiroshi had recently moved into a new home and his mother had forced him to welcome the neighbors. He notices that the house next door looks very sinister, and has only a single window. Hiro's mother went to one of the neighbors to deliver a souvenir. She asked the lady if she knew the family of the people who lived in that sinister house next door. The lady says that she has never seen them, but someone must certainly live there, as at night it is possible to see shadows through the window. At dinner, the boy's parents are talking about this mysterious neighbor who is never seen, and Hiro is very uncomfortable, and says he's going to his room to finish cleaning up. If he had a bad feeling before, imagine now discovering that the window of the sinister house is right in front of his. Hiro was very worried but decided to go to sleep. In the middle of the night a scary voice began calling him from outside, asking if he was sleeping. When he opened the window, he saw on the other side a bizarre woman, who kept asking him if he liked the house and calling him to visit her. Hiro just closed the window and decided he should ignore it. Maybe it was his imagination. The next night he again hears the old woman's voice, asking how he was feeling. She says that since he didn't visit her the night before, now she would go to him. Hiro is desperate. When opening the window, the monster is with a cane trying to cross to his house. Hiro slaps the old demonic's cane and goes screaming for his parents. But when the parents get to the room, there is nothing wrong. The neighbor's window is closed and they certainly don't believe Hiroshi. He was still pretty suspicious and he knew someone was watching him all along. On the third night, the voice came again, even creepier, saying that it wanted to see Hiro's little face. The monster starts to stretch his arms to reach Hiro's window and tells him that he just needs to open it for her to enter. Hiro pulls away and panics, just waiting for the worst. Well, it's at dawn that we can see something dark. The demon's window has stretched out and is almost reaching Hiro's. What happened? Has she managed to catch him yet, or will next night be Hiroshi's last? Saiko is dreaming about her boyfriend Kishimoto, who brought her a nice ring as a gift. But she knows she is dreaming and asks why is he using Aristotle's technique to deliver the ring. But the big thing about this dream is that it's not a beautiful romantic scene. With the arrival of Jack the Ripper, everything became a nightmare. The assassin fatally attacks Kishimoto, and Saiko wakes up scared. The ring box next to her bed was empty, and worst of all, Kishimoto was found stabbed to death. It didn't make any sense at all, and more tenebrous situations were waiting for Saiko. Something disturbing started to happen in the following days. She realizes that she is being watched all the time inside her room. Holes were made in the wall right in front of her, and she needs to cover it with tape. Even in the ceiling they use drills to spy on her. Saiko needs to act somehow. She punches a sinister finger that appeared in the hole and sticks a screwdriver through the hole in the ceiling and hits the damn stalker in the eye. She was sure it was her family spying on her. The father and brother have a bruised eye and finger, but they say they were injured outside the house. So, to escape this bizarre place, Saiko decides to go to her aunt's house, but finds out that there is no bus to her neighborhood, and decides to walk. She passes over a bridge and falls straight into a dead-end street. Which is quite intriguing. She knows she has taken the right path. Turning another corner, again, no way out. When trying to access the main avenue, something is wrong. In addition to the blockade once again, all pedestrians are wearing masks. A man approaches Saiko and asks if she needs help as she looks afflicted. He offers to show her the correct way to her aunt's house. Is it a good idea to follow him? They have to enter through the wooden houses and go through the rooms, among several masked families. The environment is very bizarre. A little further on, there is a crowd screaming at the door of a house, ordering them to open the door. Saiko is horrified. She helps the couple and discovers that residents who don't let the pedestrians pass inside their houses are attacked by other masked people. There is no more private property, all houses are open and with free movement. The girl says she needs to go to her aunt's house, and the couple warns of two things. First, for her to wear a mask to move around in that place, and second, to take extreme care when crossing the bridge over the river. That place is dangerous and there's a killer on the loose. As there are no options, Saiko advances through the mysterious place. Several masked people are staring at her. There is a terrible tension in the air. She finds her aunt's house and runs to call her. Hearing the voice asking her to come in, she finds her aunt very different, wearing a bathing suit. The whole room is full of holes with stalkers on the prowl. She questions how her aunt manages to live like that, and the woman replies that she got used to it. There is no way to escape the stalkers, and she still thinks that her niece should also take off some of her clothes. Saiko is shocked by her aunt's bizarre behavior and says she has gone completely crazy. Now the woman was freaked out. Armed with a knife, she orders the girl to take off her clothes, otherwise, she will cut her into pieces. Saiko runs away in despair. Things get worse and worse. She finds a dead person along the way, and when she turns around, a creepy creature is looking through the holes. The stalkers are frightening, have many eyes and a huge head to live spying on others. Once again, Saiko is found by the man in the mask, who helps her out of that horror scene. The girl observes that in the man's hand is the ring that her boyfriend was going to give her in the dream. The man removes his mask and Jack the Ripper is revealed. He says that this time, Saiko will not escape. But the psychopath is hit from behind. A lethal blow from Saiko's aunt. She just tells her niece to head towards the river, and then she will find her way out of that place. She turns her back and walks away. Saiko even tries to call out for her aunt, but all that remained was to get out of that sinister place as quickly as possible. All this is a mystery. Is Saiko dreaming? Anyway, you better watch out for the little holes in the walls of your house. The girl Yui spends part of her day watching the beautiful scenery of Mount Fuji, because when she gets home, the situation is pretty horrible. Part of the two-story house is a yakiniku restaurant created by her father. The whole house is smeared with a thick layer of oil, with the air extremely heavy and difficult to breathe. Furniture, walls and clothes are all yellowed and covered in oil. Her father also gave off that terrible smell. And the older brother, in addition to mistreating her a lot, had a sinister habit. He often went to the kitchen to drink bottles of vegetable oil as if they were water. He even threatened her if she told their father. Yui couldn't stand that life and developed an ability to mentally calculate the saturation level of each room, due to the heavy presence of oil in the environment. She kept repeating it like a safety alert to herself. As soon as her brother Guro reached adolescence, Many pimples appeared on his face and he was constantly teased by his friends at school. And he cowardly always took it out on Yui. Guro blamed his father for making them live in all that fat. And his addiction only got worse. He locked himself in a room and started drinking liters of oil a day. He forced Yui to bring him more and more bottles. Angry that he didn't have the money to buy more of his oil, Guro squeezes his face and gushes Yui with a disgusting secretion. She screams that it was disgusting and Guro gets out of control. He grabs his sister and squeezes his face even tighter, dropping disgusting oil threads from his hundreds of pimples, which he calls volcanoes. The situation is disturbing. Those things falling on his sister's face is really disgusting. Then the father suddenly appears and hits Guro in the head with an iron shovel and kills the boy. After a while, two men were talking on the street. One of them says that he wants to go to Yakiniku Daruma, because it has a very tasty meat. Despite the place being disgusting and greasy, the meat was amazing. The two go there and ask Yui's father for that tasty meat, and the man says that the stock ran out the day before. Certainly, the tasty meat was his own son's body. Yui feels that the oil's saturation is already over 70%. She starts having frightening nightmares about the eruption of Mount Fuji, but instead of lava, it was oil. She drowned in that river of oil through the streets. Now her skin showed the beginnings of the nasty pimple infection. Yui has been getting aggressive. The saturation of fat in the environment has already reached 85%. One night, Yui wakes up to her father giving her a bottle of oil while she sleeps. She gets furious, saying that he was the one who was intoxicating her every night, but her father simply asked her to go back to sleep. In the following days, Yui decided that she would no longer sleep a wink at night. She was afraid that her father would show up again. And yes, he was just waiting for the right moment. Now her father has fallen into a disturbing addiction and started drinking so much oil that the house was leaking grease all the way through the ceiling. The environment had a thick layer and a dense fog with shades of brown and yellow. One day, Yui heard a scream and was able to spy on her father, slicing his own foot to serve it at yakiniku. The saturation reached 100%, you can feel the disgusting feeling from here. This story begins with the protagonist nailing some sort of voodoo doll to a tree. As the boy hammered the nails on the other side of town, Uya, his schoolmate, begins to feel a severe stomachache. The next morning, in the classroom, Soichi overhears two girls talking about what happened the night before. They comment that Uya was found passed out on the street and ended up being hospitalized. Hearing this, Soichi smiles and tells himself that that boy was very cocky and needed a lesson. Meanwhile, outside, Kuroda and Akiyama are fighting. Apparently, this isn't the first time they've had a falling out. Soichi watches from afar and is already planning his next trap. On the way back home, he finds a frog buried among the dry winter leaves and takes it home, on the pretense that it was too cold in the forest. Upon arriving home, he introduces the new family member and uses the animal to scare his older sister. But he ends up being interrupted by his brother, who makes fun of him by saying that Soichi is an exotic boy. Back in his room, he plans a new curse, which he will cast against another of his colleagues. He goes into the forest in the middle of the night and starts digging a grave, where he buries a doll similar to Kuroda. Soichi orders him to stay there hibernating and leave only when spring arrives. A few days later, some boys from Soichi's class comment that Kuroda hasn't been attending classes anymore. They even question Akiyama about the boy, as he and Kuroda had been fighting the week before. From a distance, Soichi overhears the conversation. What he didn't expect was that the old man who takes care of the forest would interfere in his plans. Seeing a doll nailed to his cedar once more, the old man is possessed with rage and swears to himself that he will find the damn person responsible for doing it. A little further on, the man finds another doll buried and his anger only increases. Soon after, he spots a body buried with its head out. At first he believes he is a dummy, but when he approaches the old man is startled to discover that he was a teenager who was buried alive. The next morning, that was the main subject at school. Kuroda had been found passed out and buried in a cedar forest. When he woke up in the hospital, the boy said he didn't remember anything about what had happened. Upon hearing this, Soichi becomes very upset. After all, his intention was for Kuroda to leave there only in the spring. But since his plan didn't work, the boy starts to create a new curse. This time, he notices 3 of his classmates who used to be close friends. The boy notices that Kawai and Ishizaka aren't talking to each other much during their conversation and theorizes that something could have happened between the two. This reason created in his head was enough to make him plot something against Kawai, under the pretense that he would be helping Ishizaka to get revenge on him. That night, at his house, Soichi tries again to scare his sister, this time with a spider he was holding with the help of a pair of chopsticks. Kuchi, his brother, interferes again in this bad joke. The boy slaps the spider and it lands in Soichi's face. The boy tastes his own medicine and gives a hysterical scream. His two older brothers are surprised to find that the youngest is also afraid of spiders. The next day, during class, Soichi uses a pin to skewer a wooden puppet. At that time, Kawaii feels a strong stomach ache and asks the teacher to go to the bathroom. Once in the cabin, he realizes that his stomach has stopped hurting and tries to leave to go back to class. However, the door was locked and the boy had to climb out of the opening at the top. But before he could do that, Soichi throws a spider at the wooden puppet and it appears there in the bathroom, where Kawaii was. The boy despairs when he sees those giant hairy legs climbing on the door. And to make things worse, the spider begins to wrap him in its web, as if he were an insect. Later, Kawaii is found passed out in the bathroom, his entire body wrapped in toilet paper. Soichi approaches Ishizaka and asks if he is satisfied with the result. But Ishizaka interrupts him and says he doesn't know what Soichi is talking about. The protagonist hides. He is embarrassed that Ishizaka caught his attention in front of other students, and plans to get revenge on him. That night, he makes a call to Ishizaka's house and says that the young man has been drawn to win a gift, but he would need to attend Sakurayama Park if he wanted to receive it. Despite knowing that that was Soichi's voice, the boy goes there to find out what his classmate wanted with him. While waiting for him, Ishizaka is surprised by a mysterious creature with giant arms and legs. He is terrified and tries to flee through the forest, but the monster continues to chase him, until one of the creature's legs gets caught in a trap. The old man who guarded the forest spread traps everywhere in order to capture the person responsible for nailing dolls to his cedars. Ishizaka discovers that the whole scene was Soichi's work trying to scare him. The boy leaves, leaving the protagonist trapped in the tree. And he still advises him to get out of there soon, before the old man finds him. Minutes later, when Soichi was about to break free, the man arrives with an axe in his hands. The boy even tries to hide, but the old man throws the axe and almost hits his head. The man says that's the price for vandalizing his trees and assures Soichi that he won't make it out of there alive. The boy starts screaming desperately, but luckily for him, Kuchi appears and manages to convince the old man to release his brother. Otherwise, he would denounce him for spreading traps for humans in the forest. Back at home, Soichi refuses to listen to his parents' sermon. Instead, he goes to his room to check on the frog he caught in the woods a few days earlier. The boy opens the box where he had trapped the animal and discovers that the animal was already rotten. It definitely seems impossible to have a happy ending in the hands of this devilish boy. Now we will go to the second story, still starring Soichi, called Cloth Teacher. It's the first day of school and the students are returning from summer break. Professor Yanagita arrives in the room to teach the first class of the day, but there is something strange about him. His face is completely different than it was before the holidays and his mouth is full of nails. During the break, Soichi and Yanagita play with throwing nails at each other. From afar, some students observe and decide to investigate. After all, the Yanagita professor they knew would never participate in this kind of prank, apart from that his appearance was more similar to a rag doll than a person. Wakayama, the class representative, questions Soichi about what he had done to the teacher. The boy tries to run away to avoid being interrogated, but Wakayama pulls him by his shorts and ends up exposing his backside. Soichi even manages to escape, but is furious with his colleague. He then thinks of some way to punish him for the shame he put him through. The next morning, Wakayama notices the presence of hair growing on his face. That was the result of the plague cast by Soichi. At school, all the students make fun of the boy. Seeing that scene, the freaked-out professor decides to shave Wakayama's beard. The boy, of course, tries to run away, but ends up being cornered by Yanagita. When he realizes that there is no way to escape, the boy grabs the professor's legs, who ends up falling and cutting his own finger with the razor. At that time, the man is furious and goes up to Wakayama again, cutting his face. But, luckily for the boy, Professor Soga appears and saves him from that situation. She tells the teacher that the school principal wants to see him in his office right away. Wakayama picks up Yanagita's finger that has fallen to the ground and his suspicions are confirmed. That was not his teacher, but an imposter made of cloth. Later, he and his friends arrange to find Professor Soga so they can come up with a plan to find the real Professor Yanagita. But, to the boy's despair, this time, it was a rag doll trying to impersonate Professor Soga. The monster chases after them and manages to capture Kutra. While trying to kill him with a rope around his neck, Wakayama spots a bonfire and takes the opportunity to make a barbecue with the diabolic rag doll. His plan works and the woman runs away in despair. Then the boys go to Soichi's house to investigate, as he was the only one capable of creating it all. In the basement, They find a puppet similar to Wakayama, and soon the boy understands that Soichi had made puppets of his teachers and somehow put them in their place. The boy already knows that he will be the next one, as Soichi had made a doll similar to him. Kota tries to destroy that puppet, but Wakayama prefers to let Soichi go ahead with his plan so they can find out what happened to their real teachers. Soichi makes final preparations for Wakayama's puppet, but his brother arrives just in time and questions the boy about that bizarre puppet. The boy runs away as usual so he doesn't have to explain, and the doll goes after him. Then Professor Yanagita's puppet appears and calls Soichi to play with the nails. Soichi denies it and says that there is something more interesting waiting for him. In the schoolyard, Wakayama is losing his strength. That damn doll has already started to suck his soul. The monstrous teacher is about to catch him when the boy's puppet runs past her. She runs after him and destroys him, saying he was the one who set her face on fire. Soon after, Soichi appears running away from Professor Yanagita. The puppet continued to shoot nails at the boy. And when he tries to escape by climbing the fence, his rear is exposed again by the creature he created. And this time, the whole school was there to watch that dark scene. In this moment of despair, Soichi cancels his curse and both Professor Yanagita's puppet and Professor Soga's puppet revert to inanimate dolls. That same day, the real teachers were found alive in their homes. And finally, Wakayama managed to get rid of that weird beard. Soichi, on the other hand, was still embarrassed about being exposed to all of his schoolmates. A young woman named Yuki has just passed away and her family is at her funeral. Her father still screams in disbelief at the loss of his daughter. The next day, the girl's fiancé named Toshio appears at her grave carrying flowers and is promptly scolded by Yuki's father. He definitely doesn't like the boy and blames him for his daughter's death. He attacks the boy and runs off to get something. While Toshio starts talking symbolically with his fiancé, the gentleman comes back and places a scarecrow right in front of him, saying that it was to scare ticks like him away. The boy decides to just leave. Another day has passed, and Mr. Namada realizes that the scarecrow has turned into his daughter, and she's staring at him, but she doesn't say a word. Really scary. He calls everyone he knows to see that incredible phenomenon. Apparently it was his daughter's soul inside the scarecrow. But it would only be like that in the cemetery, because if he took the scarecrow home, it would return to normal. In the following days, several families decided to put scarecrows on the graves of their loved ones, following Mr. Namada's idea. And they all changed into the appearance of the deceased ones. Toshio went back to his beloved's grave and was paralyzed to find Yuki's scarecrow staring at him. He begins to dream that he was talking to Yuki and the scarecrow appeared during the dream. Toshio wakes up scared and realizes that he slept in the cemetery. He almost has a heart attack when he sees Yuki looking at him. Toshio runs in panic down the cemetery corridor, and when he stops, as he is completely out of breath, Yuki is in front of him again. With that terrible look. At dawn, a couple from the region found a scarecrow of their son with a hateful expression looking directly at his father. When the man tries to attack that bizarre thing, he ends up dying with the stake stuck in his chest. And the scarecrow seemed to have taken his revenge. And so does Toshio. He was dead with Yuki right on top of him. It seems that the people blamed for the deaths of their relatives will be punished by the scarecrows. Sukano is a new student at the high school, and despite being a bit strange, Shibayama and Hosatani invite him to join a new group they are creating, called the Supernatural Club. The boy is very excited and says he loves investigations. After all, he comments that that city is full of mysteries, which makes friends intrigued. Young people have lived there forever and have never seen anything exciting. Anyway, they say they're having a welcome party for the student after class. And the new kid pulls out of the bush beside him a bizarre flower, like some kind of eyeball. The friends don't understand where that came from, and Sukano leaves jumping with happiness. Back in the Supernatural Club room, Shibayama says he dissected the plant and it really was a human eye. Kitagawa, who I'd say is the red-haired light Yugami, says that plant is a warrior spirit, and Sukano wonders if he can see spirits too. Shibayama makes a presentation of his supposed psychic powers, such as how to break the tip of a spoon with his mind. The new student also decides to try, and amazingly the boy manages to break the spoon, which leaves everyone astonished. Sukano says that it was just a joke. He comments that the secret is to twist the spoon until it is fragile to break easily. That's how magicians do it. But the girls say they haven't seen him twisting the spoon. Shibayama doesn't like the boy's attitude at all, for he claims that his power is mental and not a cheap trick of illusion. After the club meeting, Kitagawa goes to his classmate to comment in an ironic tone that perhaps Shibayama has been unmasked by the new student. They are interrupted by Sukano, who came to tell them about one more interesting thing he had found. A trail with a mysterious waterfall, at north of the school. The students respond that there has never been a waterfall there, but they decide to call upon the club and follow the new student there. They walk along the path next to the school and are surprised to find the waterfall. They wonder how they had never noticed it before. Shibayama has a supernatural feeling coming from that place. His friends ask what is happening to him, and the boy says he's worried, because he'll have to present his mental powers on television and people won't be impressed with spoon tricks. He needs something more powerful. Then Sukano comes up with a curious story, that by going down the stone path to the bottom of the waterfall, he gained an incredible skill. And he demonstrates his power by releasing a blue bolt at a bird that flew above them. Sukano convinces Shibayama that the waterfall provides supernatural powers. 2 days passed, and something was wrong. Shibayama has disappeared since the waterfall encounter. Everyone is worried about his disappearance. A lot of strange things started happening in a short time. Kitagawa says he senses an evil presence coming from the waterfall, and he believes Shibayama is deep inside her. They go to the location and he confirms that his friend's spirit is trapped down there. But it was no longer possible to remove his body. They theorize that perhaps he had jumped there, frustrated with his false powers. Sukano appears absolutely out of nowhere as usual and says they are wrong as he saw Shibayama fall from the waterfall while trying to receive the powers. The friends return to school devastated and feel that more scary things are coming. Once again, the sinister new student arrives euphoric, saying that he has found a mysterious lake nearby. If everything that has already happened wasn't enough, the group goes to investigate. When they arrive at the scene, nothing makes sense. How could a lake of that size have arisen and no one ever seen it? Hosatani yells at the sinister student, accusing him of having convinced Shibayama to go down the waterfall, and the boy starts laughing in an evil and scary way. He asks why everyone is nervous like that. If they really are part of the supernatural club, they should love these mysteries. Suddenly, a terrifying Godzilla emerges from the mysterious lake in front of them, leaving everyone paralyzed. It was already night, and the girls gathered to talk about this new student. Since the arrival of this boy, sinister things began to emerge. They are sure he is responsible for this. The girls then hear someone knocking on the door. But who would be so late at night? The disturbing voice comes from outside saying, "Please open the door." It's Shibayama. When they open the door, they find a zombie all bloated and scary. They quickly lock the door and are trying to figure it out, because the voice was exactly the same as Shibayama's. The zombie then blasts the door with its power and the girls flee to the street. A little further on, they come across Kitagawa, along with multiple immense moai statues. He says that when he came back from class, it all came to his house. Sukano emerges from behind the statues and the girls quickly accuse him of being the culprit for bringing these curses to town. The boy, as usual, deflects the accusations saying that he just loves to look for mysteries. Shibayama's zombie also arrived there and fired a power at Kitagawa, knocking a statue towards him. And Sukano is fascinated by the power of the zombie. The monster continues shooting lightning at Kitagawa, but the boy takes revenge with a red bolt, blowing up his zombified friend. Sukano says he's not surprised by the powers, as he knows the real story. He saw Kitagawa pushing his friend into the waterfall to become the sole wielder of the powers. However, the red-haired Kira just didn't count on one detail. He wanted to team up with Sukano to turn the city into an even more creepy place. But the new student says he won't accept his partnership. The next day, everything was back to normal, no bizarre things. The mystery student had transferred and Kitagawa had disappeared. The image of that paranormal student will always be a mystery to that group. Kanako drives through the forest at night to reach the inner city. Her grandfather had passed away a year ago and her grandmother, Osode, lived there alone. The old woman had asked for a family member to visit her, as something had been making her scared lately. When Kanako arrives at the village, she parks her car and keeps walking until she comes to a bridge. She manages to see her grandmother's house on the other side of the river, but as she crosses the bridge she comes across an old man. The woman approaches and asks if he knows his grandmother. The man says yes and Kanako thanks him for visiting. She believes that the old man is her grandmother's friend and asks him to keep her company. However, when he raises his head, Kanako realizes that he was actually a ghost. The young woman runs to her grandmother's house and knocks on the door until, finally, Osode answers. Kanako quickly enters and locks the door. Then she asks her grandmother what was that creature outside the house. Osode then reveals that is her uncle, Kingaro. He had died when she was still a child. Since her husband passed away, every day, the soul of Kingaro and other villagers appears on that bridge. Looking out the window, Kanako could hardly believe what her eyes were seeing. Her grandmother says that the ghosts are calling for her all night. As a result, the old woman could barely sleep. Osode then asks her granddaughter to sit next to her, as she would tell a story from her childhood. She says she was born and raised in that house, so she spent her entire life there. Today, that village is almost uninhabited, but in the past many families lived there. At that time, there was a very strange tradition in that village. Every time someone died, the other residents went to the banks of the river to say goodbye. However, at Kingoro's funeral, something peculiar happened. His body was lying on a stretcher, following the river path. Upon reaching the bridge, the stretcher hit a rock and the man ended up in the water. Then the body sank instead of following the current. Those people believed that if the dead followed the river's current on their stretchers, they would float up to the heavens. But as Kingoro had sunk, his spirit would stay in that place forever. The last, until then, to suffer the same fate was Shokichi, a 2-meter man and Osode's first love. He was a young man in his 20s who, despite his size, had a really soft heart. For his funeral, it was necessary to use 2 stretchers. Osode was very sad and watched the ceremony from the bridge. However, Shokichi's stretcher crashes into a rock and the boy is knocked over. However, due to his size, his body gets stuck. When she looks down, Osode has the impression that her late fiancé is staring at her. Some men use a branch to help the boy continue his journey, but his body ends up sinking in the river and his soul is imprisoned there. The woman believes that her old family members are waiting for her. That's why the ghosts come every night to call her. Osode cries and confesses that she is very afraid. Kanako looks out the window again, and this time, she manages to spot Shokichi. She promises her grandmother that the next morning the two of them will leave that place. However, Osode believes it is too late and she will not last long. The woman asks her granddaughter that when she dies, the girl will bury her body and still says that, whatever happens, she doesn't want to go down that river at all. After making her last wish, Osode loses her strength. Kanako tries to wake her up, but when she realizes she is still inside her car, the young woman believes she got tired from the trip and then stopped on the road to take a nap. Still, she is very scared because her dreams seem to be totally real. She follows the path until she arrives at the entrance to the village. After parking the car, Kanako walks through the forest and, a little further on, she manages to see the bridge. Her body feels goosebumps as everything was happening exactly as in the dream. When she arrives at the bridge, the young woman comes across an elderly man. However, this time Kanako passes him and goes straight to her grandmother's house. But to her surprise, that man was not a ghost. He was an old resident of the village and informs the girl that Osode has just passed away. Kanako refuses to believe that story. She goes to her grandmother's house and looks for her everywhere. When she doesn't find her, she goes outside and spots dozens of ghosts gathered to celebrate Osode's arrival. As she floats down the river, her stretcher crashes into the bridge and her body sinks. Kanako tries to stop it, but it's too late. It was a day of celebration for those souls as Osode and Shokichi could finally get married. When she looks back at the bridge, Kanako notices that all the ghosts are gone. Her souls join Osode and together they follow the flow of that river. Unfortunately, the young girl was not able to fulfill her grandmother's last wish. The Great Papyrus Circus arrives in a small town in the countryside of Japan. The Master of Ceremonies welcomes the visitors and announces the first performance, which is made by 3 clowns. However, the show does not last long. Seconds later, one of them has an accident and is taken off stage by his colleagues. The second act is what everyone has been waiting for. Layla, the main attraction, walking a tightrope. The girl was scared and visibly sad. A young man in the audience looks at her and recognizes her. He remembers seeing her sitting in a city park and has been unable to get her out of his mind ever since. The same happens with the other young people who are watching the show. Even those who are seeing the girl for the first time can't take their eyes off her. Was it Layla's presence that drew them to that place? Well, the young woman makes it through and the show goes on. Now it's the turn of 3 tightrope walkers to cross the tightrope in a kind of human tower. There was no safety net to keep them from crashing to the ground. After a few steps, they become unbalanced and the fall is inevitable. After their bodies are collected, Joe, the knife thrower, takes his place on stage. His target will be a man in a blonde dress and wig. Joe throws several knives and hits the target correctly, making him the greatest performer in the circus. Joe then asks if he can now marry Layla, but the Master of Ceremonies says there are still a few knives left to throw. Joe then throws the next knife and it ends up in the opposite direction. He tries one more and ends up hitting his colleague in the chest. However, Joe doesn't give up. He is determined to earn the right to marry Layla. For that, he decides to create a new trick. This time, he will be his own target as he throws the knives. Joe lies down on the floor and throws the first knife up. It lands right next to his face and he continues. He throws the second knife, but this time he had no luck. The object stabs his chest, causing him the same fate as his colleagues. The next performance is the fire breather, but the guy ends up getting burned during the performance and becomes barbecue. The lion tamer also takes the worst and is devoured by the lion. The entire audience is terrified to see that massacre, but the show goes on. For the last performance, Mario, the newest member of Papyrus Circus, would partner with Layla on her trapeze. The young woman begs him to give up, as he would surely end up dead. She even claims that the master of ceremonies is not a person, but a demon, a reaper of death. According to her, his role is to present the show and collect the souls of the artists. Layla claims to love the young man and doesn't want his life to be taken away like the others. He starts the show, but when he is swinging on the trapeze, the rope breaks and his entire body breaks when he reaches the ground. At that moment, the master of ceremonies begins to cry and says that all those events that followed were a great tragedy. He then asks the audience who would like to join them to work at Papyrus Circus. The man also promises that whoever has the talent to become the big star will be able to marry Layla. In this way, the master of ceremonies who, according to the girl, was in fact a demon, gets new victims to work in his circus. The only survivor of that freak show, the clown, calls Layla and tries to convince her to run away from that place with him. But before the girl could accept, the knife that Joe had thrown before comes loose and lands on the clown's chest. Do you think anyone will be able to defeat that demon and save Layla? Or is the girl doomed to spend her life serving as bait so the Reaper can keep collecting souls out there? Mitsuo Mori is a successful young painter. The boy recognizes that the reason for his fame was because he found the model Nana Hori, the perfect girl for his source of inspiration. At an autograph session at his art exposition, he saw a dark-haired woman in the distance looking at his painting. Mori was dazzled by the woman and came over to ask her what she thought of the painting. The girl says that she thought it was good, but the model's expression was rather simple. If the painter found a model equal to his skill, it would be much more interesting. At Mori's house, he is creating another portrait of Nana, and look who shows up there. The girl from the exposition. She arrives with an arrogant tone, making up a story that Mori had said he couldn't take painting Nana anymore, that he was uninspired looking at her mediocre expression. Clearly Nana got furious at Mori and left. When trying to question the girl, the boy is surprised by her offer. She wants to be the new model. Mori accepts the proposal and begins painting the mysterious girl who identifies herself as Tomie. During the process, she emphasizes that her beauty is unique and no painter has ever been able to express her perfection in a painting. She hopes Mori is the right person for this. The boy finishes the painting and shows his work to Tomie. She starts laughing in a disturbing way and says he didn't represent even 10% of her beauty. Surely she had overestimated him. Tomie says goodbye, saying that she doesn't work with talentless artists. The painter is upset, and from that moment he develops a compulsion, an uncontrollable urge to paint the perfect picture of Tomie. But he ends up destroying the painting because he doesn't think it's good enough. While the painter is at a bar trying to get that out of his head, he meets a friend who commented on a sculptor named Iwata, who was a close colleague of theirs. The boy is having success with his sculptures. Apparently he found an incredible model as inspiration. When the friend shows the photo taken of the two, there she was. Tomie. He also says that the photo for some reason came out blurry and the image is indeed very sinister. Mori is speechless. That same night, he went to Iwata's house and asked the sculptor to let him see the famous sculptures that everyone has been talking about. And the man refuses. He says that Tomie will be only his. Mori stops him from closing the door and speaks with a psychopathic expression that will force his way inside. It's not possible that anyone had managed to represent Tomie's beauty. Then the painter kills Iwata, hitting him with a stone head from the sculpture. In the room ahead are dozens of Tomie's sculptures, all broken. And the girl was there too. She cries and says she is desperate, because Iwata had built the perfect statue, but decided to break it. Mori says that he will grant her wish and paint a picture of her to immortalize the girl's beauty. Back in the studio, Mori is freaking out, painting, and praising Tomie's beauty all the time. And the girl just replies that it's curious that everyone who falls in love with her tries to kill her. It was done. This time the boy was sure, it was his masterpiece. He then shows the painting. A version of Tomie with a demonic face, a monstrous face glued to her head. The model is furious, thinking how could she be portrayed as a monster, and throws the painting away. She again starts her disturbing laughter. However, Mori doesn't accept that humiliation and attacks Tomie. The painter cuts the model into pieces, but here is the dark secret. All her cutted parts start to grow back. Tomie cannot die. Soon, her beauty will be multiplied and eternalized. A couple has their car broken in the middle of a forest and a boy named Anzai decides that they should seek help. They walk for a while and find a small cabin with some children gathered. They look a bit sinister. Anzai asks if they have a phone so he can call for help. But they are silent, and begin to shake with rage. The girl named Kana decides they better move on. Shortly after, she warns her partner that the children were following them. The boy doesn't pay much attention, so the kids run towards them and hit a vine in Kana's neck. They see the blood running down her neck and go out of control, jumping on top of the girl. Apparently, the couple managed to mislead the boys. But Kana is traumatized. The children sucked her blood for a moment. Ahead, there was a small village. They noticed that it looked like a ghost town, and they suspect that the red stains, which are everywhere, could be blood. That place was tenebrous. Anzai knocks on the door of one of the cabins and a very pale young man appears. The couple explains everything that happened and asks to make a call. The pale man says that unfortunately he doesn't have a phone, but that the girl is bleeding and he can help with that, so they invite them in. While he does some bandage on Kana, he comments that the children are not from around there and appear from time to time. He is the only resident in that village. As he looks suspicious, the couple watches him closely as the man speaks and drinks a cup of blood-red liquid. He says that Kana reminds him of a person very dear to him. She was his very lonely beloved mate, who kept saying her blood wanted to leave her. One day she cut herself and the boy drank the blood from her neck. As time passed, a tree with bloody fruits was born in that wound. More and more the girl was being drained, until she was completely dry. In the midst of that sinister story, Anzai realized that it was already late and the man says that it is better for them to spend the night there. At dawn, Anzai woke up scared and dizzy. Kana was gone. He goes down the hall and finds blood on the floor. Just ahead was a room that shocked him. Roots with pulsing blood bubbles. The pale man appears and Anzai asks him, "Where is Kana?" And the man replies that he must be dreaming as Kana was sleeping. Anzai is feeling really bad. And he hears a scary voice telling him to run away. It was the body of a man with almost no sign of life. He tells Anzai that the bizarre man of the house has used some satanic power and turned every villager into plants that bear blood fruits so he can feed. "Flee soon, or you will become one of us." The boy runs back to the room and finds Kana sitting on the bed. He says they need to get out of there immediately, but is interrupted by the owner of the house. The man says they can even try, but eventually they will come back, for Kana already has a blood plant growing from her wound. Anzai ignores the creepy host and the couple leaves. But Kana is feeling very tired along the way. The evil tree is getting bigger and bigger around her neck. And Anzai then notices that his hand has also been contaminated. The boy remembers the resident's words. There's only one way to not end up totally dry. Eat your own blood fruit. However, this will turn you into a vampire insatiable for people's blood. Looking to the side, Kana was already feeding on her blood bubble. That was the end of it. During childhood, Akeda Riko always had nightmares about her father dying. When this happened, the girl would cry desperately until wake up. Her biggest fear was the thought that one day she might lose him. A few years later, she married Tokura Makoto and moved in with her husband's family. However, the girl was never welcomed by Makoto's parents and grandparents. The only person in that house who considered her as part of the family was little Tomoka, her sister-in-law. After dinner, while walking through the corridors, the girl spots two elderly people in one of the rooms. Makoto reveals that those are her great-grandparents and they didn't used to walk around the house as they were too old. Riko greets them, but they remain silent and the girl notices that their faces are very pale. Maybe this is just another consequence of age. That night, she had a nightmare about her father in a hospital bed. The man was in his last moments of life and asks Riko to be happy with her husband. Then, the girl starts crying and screams for him, until she is woken up by Makoto. Apparently, those nightmares she had as a child never went away. The next morning, Riko observes her new family reunited. Everyone seemed happy and she didn't understand why they didn't accept her. Walking through the house, the girl notices how big that place is. Which was strange, since there weren't many people living there. Suddenly, the girl spots a terrifying ghost in one of the rooms. When she tells Makoto about the event, the young man reveals that this was probably his great-great-grandmother, who is 125 years old. Riko is terrified and asks how the woman could live for so long. So her husband says that his great-great-grandfather and his mother also lived in that house. They were very pale and almost disappearing, but if you look hard you can still find them. Makoto explains that those weren't her real bodies, but after images. The following year, Ryuzu, the young man's grandfather, died and all the family gathered for his funeral. Even Riko's father attended the ceremony and the girl was very happy to see him again. They later say their goodbyes and the couple returns to the living room, where all the family members have gathered. However, something very strange happens. What was supposed to be a farewell actually became a resurrection event, or nearly so. Makoto's father asks everyone present to join hands and join forces to mentalize Ryuzu's presence. The old man had been cremated, but by the will of his family, he should appear again in front of their eyes, as if he were alive. And it was just like that. A few seconds later, Ryuzu reappears like a miracle and all of his family members come to him to welcome him. Upon seeing this scene, Riko is paralyzed. She could never have imagined that it would be possible to bring the dead back to life. But later, back at the haunted house, Makoto reveals that his grandfather was not resurrected. That creature wasn't a ghost, it was just an image created by the Tokura family's strong desire to see their loved one again. This was what they called the afterimage, as it wasn't a real physical presence, even though everyone was able to communicate normally with it. Even during conversations, those entities would never say something that the person who died would not say. Just like the paintings of wizards in the Harry Potter universe. However, over time, the afterimage becomes increasingly pale and gradually disappears. Until, after about 20 years, it completely disappears. But when that happens, the whole family overcome the loss, and the farewell becomes easier. It had been almost 20 years since Makoto's great-great-grandmother became an afterimage, so she was almost completely gone. At this point, no one else in the family cared about her presence, as they had almost 20 years to accept her death and say goodbye. Hearing this story, Riko asks her husband if it is possible to make an afterimage of his father the day he dies. During dinner, the young man tries to convince his parents to help him make an afterimage of his father-in-law when he reaches the end of his life. However, they refuse to do so, claiming that it makes no sense for the Tokura family to bring back someone who didn't belong to them. Riko was on the other side of the door listening to the conversation and apologizes for being so selfish. Later, in her room, the girl was crying desperately and Tomoka goes there to apologize for her parents' attitude. Riko thanks her for her concern, and as she stares at the girl, she notices her face turning transparent. Before bed, she asks Makoto if his younger sister is also an afterimage and the young man confirms. He says that the girl died 10 years ago due to an illness and, therefore, she was already starting to disappear. Months later, all the older members of the family were completely gone and Riko began to participate in all the summoning ceremonies. That day, the young man had forgotten to take his lunchbox to work and Riko runs to catch up with him. When she leaves the house, she finds her husband hugging another woman and is furious. When Makoto arrives home, the young woman reveals that she saw him with Mori, her coworker. The man admits to the affair and confesses that he intends to marry Mori someday. Riko claims she won't get a divorce and Makoto assures her that she won't have to. The young woman then asks how he can marry Mori without first divorcing her. And in that instant, Riko has the worst revelation she could ever imagine. Her husband says that 10 years ago, when they were about to get married, the girl had an accident and ended up dying. So Makoto begged her father to create an afterimage of her. Riko obviously cannot believe this story and the young man claims that there is a grave for her in the Ikeda family home. Knowing that it was an afterimage actually made Riko take a huge weight off her shoulders. The next day, she silently left the Tokura family's house and made her way to her house. There are only 10 years left until Riko disappears completely and the question that remains in her head is, who will go first, her or her father? Regardless of the answer, the most important thing for her was that now, finally, she had returned to her home. A young woman named Riza loses her memory and is taken home by her fiancé, Makita. The young man explains that he found the girl wandering in the streets after school, and she didn't even know where she lived. That night, the girl suffered from serious nightmares. She wakes up and hears someone knocking on her door. Seconds later, the door opens and a creepy caterpillar crawls into the room. The next morning, she tells Makita about this nightmare and the young man asks what could have made Riza dream of a giant caterpillar. The girl says she doesn't know what caused that nightmare, but according to her, it all felt very real and terrifying. Makita then invites her for a walk and claims it could cheer her up. They go to a park and sit on the banks of the river. While enjoying the view, the young man confesses his love for Riza and reveals that it was in that place that he said he loved her for the first time. The girl had completely lost her memory and didn't remember any of it. Next, Makita invites his fiancé over to her house. He informs her that his father is there, however, he is very sick and hardly gets out of bed. So she wouldn't even need to see him. At the young man's house, Riza asks if his father's illness is serious and the young man says yes. He used to be a novelist, but nowadays, he can't write anymore. As for his mother, she had died shortly after giving birth to the boy. Makita says that, despite not remembering going to that place, Riza has been there a few times. Suddenly, they hear a noise of something crawling behind the door and the girl asks what it is. Makita says that it's just his father approaching, but that noise makes Riza shiver. A few seconds later, the old man opens the door and crawls into the room. This was the second time he and his future daughter-in-law had met. Makita asks his father to go back to rest, as he couldn't put in so much effort. But he said that he needed to see his son's future wife one more time, before his body completely degenerates. However, Makita reveals to his father that Riza had lost her memory and did not remember that they were engaged. Then the old man says goodbye and says that he will return to his room to rest. Later, back at her house, Riza remembers the feeling she felt when talking to Makita's father. She's convinced she saw something terrifying inside, but couldn't remember what it was. Just then, her mother knocks on the door and informs her that Makita is downstairs and needs to speak to her urgently. Upon finding the young man, he reveals that his father had taken a serious turn for the worse and was dying. As his last request, he desperately wanted to see Riza one more time. Makita takes the girl by the arm and takes her to his house. Upon entering the old man's room, she finds the most terrifying scene she has ever seen in her entire life. The man had a long line of skulls stuck to his head. Together, they formed the giant caterpillar from Riza's nightmare. Makita explains that this was the merging of their ancestral skulls, and very soon, when his father passed away, he would join them to keep the family connected forever. Through the fusion of those brains, his father shared all of their memories. The old man informs Makita that he won't last more than a few hours and orders the young man to do his duty, as the family needed an heir. At that moment, Riza regains her memory and says that she remembers everything that happened. Makita then asks if the young woman remembers accepting his marriage proposal and says that she would need to give birth to a child to continue that lineage. However, Riza claims that she cannot marry him and runs away. On the way, she ends up stumbling over that line of skulls and Makita manages to catch up to her. As he was about to grab her, his head starts to ache and he goes to his father's room. This is the perfect opportunity for Riza to get away. But instead, she walks to the bedroom to find out what had happened. Upon arriving there, she sees the old man's body with his skull opened, and Makita was right next to it. Now he was part of that devilish skull structure. The girl screams in despair and tries to run away, but Makita runs after her. Riza is so afraid that her body is paralyzed and she loses her memory again. Will the girl's future be the same as Makita's mother's, or will she somehow manage to get rid of that diabolical family? So what do you think about this anime? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like it and subscribe for more animes. See you next time.